All right, well, 7:04, hopefully some people will just filter in as the evening goes on. For those that just joined us, I was saying Noel called me about 15 minutes ago and asked me to run the meeting because he's got to take care of some issues with his airplane down in Williams that he's trying to get put back together. So I'm kind of flying blind, very impromptu, me running the meeting tonight. So not a lot of formal business. Some big things that happened since the last meeting we had a month ago now. Chris and Nan Clicks have been hard at work at the training facility over in Ephrata. And we got it opened up 2 weeks ago. Yeah, April 15th, I think the weekend was. There was a handful of us, 7 or 8 people there that worked all weekend and did a lot of cleaning and carpentry. And some of us learned how to splice tow ropes, which was an adventure. I'm going to apologize for the first person that tows on the rope that I spliced. So I'm not going to tell you which rope it was, but you'll have to figure that one out. Yeah, so it was good. Still kind of a long list of things to do, but hopefully we can get those knocked off the list as the spring and summer moves on. The runway was delayed a little bit, but I believe it's open now or will be fully open this week over at Ephrata, the glider runway. Chris, that's going to be open now, right? Or in the next day or two?
Yeah, that when I was over there, it looked like they're sweeping and doing the painting of markings, and I think it got finished up either on the weekend or it is by now. So
okay,
I believe, yeah, if it isn't done already, it'll be done near midweek.
Okay, so all right, things are looking good for the weekend there. Okay, so Henry is on and Chris are on, and apparently they were hard at work working on some bylaw changes that are going to be coming our way. Apparently they're not ready to vote on, but do you guys want to give a brief explanation of the path we're going down?
Yeah, Henry, you want to say something or? Well, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
So, yeah, we've been working on it hard, trying to get ready to vote on today. We're really hoping to have something, and it started out as fairly simple changes to add the different classes of membership that we added, but then we let Karen Funston review it, and she came back with a whole lot of other changes. The one thing we found out is that if you change one thing in the bylaws, then you're required to meet all the state statutes, and that required going through the whole thing and making a whole bunch more changes than we anticipated. Unfortunately, there was some wires got crossed, and we didn't get things done quite as quickly as we had hoped, and so we're down to the last minute, and it just got a little bogged down. I think because of the in Microsoft Word, the tracking complicated a lot of the formatting, and it just took a lot longer than we expected. So then in looking at, I found out that the board actually has to vote on it before the general meeting. And so what we're going to have to do is the board's going to have to vote on all the final changes in our next board meeting, and then we'll have to call a special meeting, I think, to actually vote on the changes. So that's where we're at. I could show you, I don't know if I can share or not, but I could show you a brief picture of what we've done so far. Maybe I can bring that up. Let me try just a second.
Is there any substantive changes that people would be interested in, or is it more just kind of legalese type stuff? I think the due structure was probably the big one, right?
Well, the adding the different classifications of membership. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's the predominant bulk of the change, right? And then kind of the details surrounding that and the second and third level effects of cracking open the bylaws.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I can share. I tried sharing earlier today with Henry and wasn't able to, but we can give it a try here. Can you give me permission, Matt, to share my screen?
I don't know that I can because I'm just logged on as a guest. Mike might have more authority in it.
Let me see what I can do. Stand by.
Jeff Curtis, could you mute your mic? Thanks.
I'm still looking. Stand by. Chris, in the upper right next to the bright red button that says leave, do you have a share button?
Yeah, I do.
Yep. Did you try that?
Well, it says to update my audio driver. I'm not going to do that. Okay, so then I click on content only. I tried that earlier and nothing comes up underneath it. So
okay, well, yeah,
not sure why.
You know, Chris, it's Henry here. I mean, I can share it from my machine, although I'm not entirely sure it's probably a best use of our time to spend hours looking through this now. We may be better off just sharing it around once we've got the finished copy for everybody to see.
Okay, yeah, I just kind of wanted to give people a quick look at what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like we've done a lot of work with very little to show for it. So it's nice for people to see that, but yeah, ultimately, I think people just need to go and read the document.
Yeah, we can save it till it's ready for prime time.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Okay. Like I said, this is kind of a really impromptu for me. Does anybody have anything else that they want to discuss or questions or anything before we get into the our guest speaker this evening?
this is Mike. Let me bring up a couple of upcoming events, please.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah. So we're now 28 days or less, I guess, from dust up, and got a lot of participants. Going to be probably twice the size of what we had last year. I think I've got all of the assistant positions filled, but I'm going to put a posting up on SGC News Group here pretty quickly, the Google News Group. Also, one thing I haven't sent out, but I will be sending out, is those of you who are interested in seeing various videos about various topics that for cross-country flying. I've got several of those that Noel and I have been collecting. And I've gotten a list from people regarding various topics they would like to have in the presented in the evening, perhaps. So I'm going to try to make two 45-minute presentations available on both Saturday and Sunday evening. And they won't be simultaneous. They're going to be back to back. That way, if you find two topics that you'd like to learn about that are given the same night, then you'll be able to do that. This year, we do have access to the CAP building, so we will be able to hold our meetings in there, and we will be able to use that for our classes that we're going to have in our various briefings. So that's an update from the last couple of years where we've been out in the big hangar. Looks like we're going to have at least 3 tow planes there, and we might be fortunate enough to have a spare beyond that. So I think all of the gliders requiring a tow plane are going to be able to be serviced well. We're planning on having a donation dinner on Sunday night and a potluck on Saturday night, and going to try to get those things out. And we should be able to we're hoping to be able to be flying even perhaps a day or two before the dust up starts, but I'm still negotiating with Ron Bellamy to get yeah, my mind just forgot somebody. Anyway, the coordinator for the tow planes, tow pilots. So I'm hoping we can provide some tows before before the dust up. With regard to the Region 8, numbers are kind of small for that. I'm hoping that some of you will look at that and say, well, maybe I ought to try that. Region 8 is renowned for being one of the most friendly regionals to go to. We have a lot of people who like to help. We have good weather briefings and good briefings on the tasks and such. We also have many of the positions there ready to go with regard to making sure we have a good event. And that's about it from me. Does someone have any questions for me?
Yeah, Mike, this is James Cooper. For the dust up, you mentioned there's quite a lot of participants. How many two-place gliders have we got in place to support the event this year?
So the answer is an interesting conundrum for me, not necessarily any other way to do it. In years past, people have brought two-place ships and kind of put them in a pool, and everybody gets a chance to be flown somewhere by someone. There's been a little less willingness to make gliders available to anyone except the clubs that actually are bringing the gliders. But fortunately, I've got, it looks like I've got 4 two-place privately owned ships that we will be able to conduct flights in. But as the clubs that are bringing gliders, what I've asked them is, we will attempt to identify, and since you're going to be helping me with this, James, we will attempt to identify which individuals who are looking for dual flights are members of specific clubs, and we will ask those specific clubs to provide at least one of however many, hopefully 2. We'd like to be able to provide at least 2 to everyone, but we'd like the clubs to service their own members first, since they're hesitant to bring anyone into one of their gliders who are not club members. So that's what I have proposed. That's what we'll see whether or not we can get done. But I believe that we will have 4 gliders that are not club related. We may have a 5th that is part of the Willamette Club, but I have been given permission from the Willamette Club to give rides in that glider to people who are not Willamette Valley Club members.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah. Tim Tanner, can you turn off your camera, please? Thank you.
Just
any
one
other
other
questions?
just one other thing on the dust up. If you've got requests for it, I can present my silver badge flight from last year too, if people are interested in that.
Okay, is that you, James?
It is, yes.
Okay. Actually, I think we've got a bunch of things that we want to talk about, and I'll send out a general email here probably tomorrow. I just finished prepping my glider today, but I was gone for almost a month, and that has really cut into the preparation time I thought I was going to have. In any case, we have a list of people who've requested a dual flight. I've already discovered that a number of those are actually individuals that would like to fly with someone, but they aren't necessarily novice or new cross-country pilots. They have experience, and so we're going to try to service those who are new first. And yeah, that's the plan at this point.
Hey, Mike, Brian Hart, just touch bases on the volunteer ground crew. I sent you
Yep.
and Noel kind of a lengthy email about, ideas. I don't know, not everybody doesn't need to see all of that, but I want to make sure that we're connected, the volunteers, on who's going to be volunteering.
So
Are there people in this group, maybe people
so-
here tonight that might want to volunteer?
oh, I actually have a huge list for you, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
I will be forwarding them to you with contact information so that you can send out emails and let them know what your plans are.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right. Back to you, Matt.
Okay. All righty. Well, I'm gonna, if nobody else has any urgent ideas, questions, or anything burning, I'll give it about 15 seconds for somebody to speak up. If not, I'm gonna hand it over to Chris Clicks to make the introduction of our guest speaker, since Chris has kind of been the organizer of it.
All right, thanks,
And the only
Matt.
question is, do they have slides that they're trying to show, and what are we going to do about that?
Yeah, they do. Well, I'll let Shad, do you want me to show the slides, or can you figure out Teams and show them yourself?
I just sent the slides to, there were like 4 or 5 people in the email. Let me see.
Yeah, I got them.
Yeah, if you don't mind
you want me
sharing,
to-
it'd probably be probably easiest.
Okay. Well, I'll start sharing and get that figured out, and I'm gonna while I'm doing that, Chris is gonna introduce you.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I met Shad down at the Soaring convention in Reno, and the idea was to introduce sailplane aerobatics to the Pacific Northwest, and we thought that a good place to do it would be Ephrata, since we've actually got an aerobatic box there. And so, yeah, I talked to Jason Steffens, who's runs Arizona Soaring, and he suggested talking to Shad, and Shad is actually, as of this year, the national advanced sailplane aerobatic champion. So a very experienced individual, and I think it'd be really fun to learn from him. And he's got an MDM-1 Fox 2-place glider that he would possibly bring up. And one of the things that I'd like to ask, maybe after his presentation, is take a poll of how many people are interested and get a feel for that. But why don't you go ahead and take it, Shad, from here, and looking forward to your presentation. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Chris. Obviously, I'm passionate about aerobatics. I'm passionate about sharing it with people, and the benefits of aerobatics extends well beyond the competitive environment. Just
Can you
like
guys
many
see
of you go.
Can you guys see the presentation?
Well, I can. It's
Yes.
Mike. I can see it.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Yes.
Great.
Okay,
So
go ahead,
yeah, thank you. So like I'm saying, the benefits extend well beyond the competitive arena. Just like many of you go out and enjoy soaring leisurely, I would imagine a great majority of your club probably doesn't go and race. So a great number of the people that enjoy aerobatics or do light aerobatics, or what we call gentlemen's aerobatics, never enter the competitive arena, but they have some advantages over their fellow pilots who do not partake in that. So as I approached this conversation, when Chris reached out to me, what I really wanted to highlight was safety, because that's really what you get out of doing some aerobatic training. If you guys know Clemens CPEC out of Boston, or not Boston, Boulder, excuse me, he does the Soaring Chest in the Sky. Social media, fantastic gentleman. Did a really, really lengthy safety assessment, and he shared it with me and gave us some permission to share a few of the slides. So I've taken this very large slide deck that he presented to us and just trimmed it down to some very poignant topics. So he looked at more than 250 soaring accidents in the United States and Europe. And if you want to go to the next slide, just to get your attention right off the top, and you can go to the next slide. You are 40 times more likely to die per hour of operation in a glider than you are in a car, which was a staggering statistic when he presented it to most of us.
I
Sir.
apologize. This is Craig Bunsen. I'm not seeing any images, any presentation. So is
Okay.
anybody else having the same issue? If not, then I'll figure it out on my end.
No, I can see it.
Okay,
Everybody can see
sorry.
it.
My apologies.
Okay, so next slide. And you can just fill the slide out. I'm sorry, I didn't know I had some animation in it. So when we talk about flying and talk about accidents, we always start to really dive into the root causes. What happened or what didn't happen, and how do we lead ourselves into that false sense of security. So, why do we think soaring isn't as dangerous as it is? And few key points here. The first being that, well, it is until it isn't, obviously. The second is oftentimes just through our own ignorance, we're unaware of the dangers that are around us. So we may just completely miss a key point. One of the things that I talk about my students when they go out and do something, which is the next point, and nothing happens, that doesn't mean that the danger wasn't there. We simply weren't aware of it, or we managed to get through it without it, rearing its ugly head. And then we get lured into this false sense of security. So next. And some more statistical analysis here. I'm going to work through the slides quickly. If you guys really want this presentation, I would highly recommend having Clemens come and give it to you. I mean, he did an incredible job putting all this information together. But really what I'm trying to drive when I get into the aerobatic portion of the discussion later is just the safety elements. So everything is statistically gotten safer. Some of it's through regulatory change. We live in a great environment where we have a pretty limited amount of regulatory push in the glider community. Some of that's because we self-police one another fairly well. There's also just a smaller capita of us. Sorry for the cantankerous 1-year-old in the background there. But soaring, as you can see, just never really seems to significantly sustain a downward trajectory in the number of accidents or fatalities. And it seems to be sporadic. So next slide, please. And I'll let you guys just ingest this real quick. 2019, big spike. Would be interesting to see the numbers post COVID. You guys, it would be interesting to get some input from the club level. I know at the commercial level, because we run Arizona Soaring, we have seen a significant spike in the number of people taking on glider training, which is great for the sport. But that also means we have a significant number of low-time glider pilots in the community now. Which leads into a couple points here in some other slides, but also leads into the fact that the older, wiser guys need to impart some of that knowledge that we've gleaned over our many years of enjoying this wonderful sport. So next slide, please. That accident looks like it hurt. I would almost guarantee that guy broke his back. So to my point, relative to experience, it's very easy to get lured into that false sense of, well, I'm a very experienced pilot and I don't make the mistakes that younger pilots make, and I'm less likely to have an accident. And you can see here, based on Clemens' analysis, that in fact, the guys with over 1,000 hours were the greatest category of folks that had an accident during his analysis. So experience can actually lead you to be complacent. Next slide, please. We all understand the benefits of studying accidents. Luckily, many of them aren't fatal, but you can see here that 11% of them are either serious or fatal. And then the key takeaway there is that really, by and large, we're not inventing new ways to try and kill ourselves, right? So these mistakes have already been invented. We just need to learn from them and learn how to prevent them. Next slide, please. Just a little bit greater granularity on some of the data that he kind of went through. So you can see there the top kind of pie chart, most of the accidents that they analyzed were actually outside the training and contest environment. So folks just out enjoying a beautiful sunny afternoon. We all know that takeoff and landing are the critical phases. So you can see there that they encompass the vast majority of accidents in those phases. And then just a little bit greater granularity in the lower right-hand corner there. Stall spin being a critical one that we touch on in the aerobatic training. I would imagine there's a handful, if not a majority of your guys that are dual category, airplane and glider. And the stall spin methods in airplane don't work real well in glider. And we can talk about that in greater detail if you'd like. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. So as Clemens dug into the details, he really broke it down into 5 key areas, right? You got failure to resist temptation, and we've all been subject to it, myself included. Basic piloting errors that we're all susceptible to make. Pre-flight negligence. I bet we've all rushed a pre-flight once in our day or hurry off through a pre-flight takeoff checklist. Lack of situational awareness is easy when you're on a long flight. You're dehydrated, you're tired, and it's easy to miss things. And then unavoidable and unclear accidents. There's a whole like another 30 or 40 slides to this deck that I went through and hid. And again, I would encourage you to maybe invite him on to give this briefing because it's a very well done briefing. But in that section, he's talking about mechanical error, manufacturing defects, heart attacks, things like that, things that are unavoidable. A gentleman in Europe that got hit by a military fighter at 410 knots, just couldn't see him. So, but by and large, most of the accidents are avoidable through training, through diligent decisions, and preparedness. So next slide, please. Then he broke it down a little bit further, and really in ways to use your experience or use the experience around you. One of the common things we see in the training environment here at our school is people are always a little bit hesitant to own up to their mistakes or their shortcomings. And it's something that's really important in a training environment, whether it's our commercial schoolhouse or your club, to really foster an environment where pilots of all ages and all abilities can fess up when they've made a mistake, right? Because that's an opportunity to educate your whole membership of that risk, how it was mitigated, how it wasn't mitigated, or the things that could have been done to either prevent it or minimize the impact of those issues. I'll give you guys a couple minutes to just read through that. I was in the military for a long time, and I always hated it when people just read slides to me. Like, I'm very capable of reading. I imagine you all are the same. Next slide, please. You all are happy to email these slides out to your membership if you'd like. So 90% of the accidents are avoidable really through good training. Next slide, please. This is a great slide relative to what the clubs can do. As I was saying, really, don't make mistakes so taboo. Yes, we want to minimize our mistakes, but we need to make sure that they're shared amongst one another so that we can learn from them and prevent them from being committed again in the future. The atmosphere that we foster as clubs and operators and instructors, that individual student instructor relationship is a really important one to develop so that your students can be honest with you without fear of reprisal or judgment. Next slide. Some key things that we see in the schoolhouse, so some things that will keep you alive. I do a lot of training, aerobatic training, primary training. Take takeoff seriously. I can't, tell you how many times a student will rush through their emergency plan. They're like, okay, I'm going to make a left turn without even talking about speed or crosswind, or we have 3 parallel runways. So which runway you're going to take? You should have a very specific plan for the very specific phases of your departure so that when something goes wrong, you're not spending precious time trying to figure out what you're going to do. You're simply executing your plan. I've seen a number of incidents occur at a number of different airports with high time pilots trying to work thermals down low. And it's not even necessarily about your, own safety or your envelope acceptable level of risk. At our airport, it's mandatory that you're in the pattern at 1,000 feet because you might be cutting off a student that's on their first solo, and now you're putting them in a precarious situation. We had a private gentleman come back on a long cross country. Again, you get tired, you're fatigued, you're dehydrated, mental cognition is down, and you just make poor decisions. But he opted to just make a really low entry into the pattern, didn't come in, check the winds, radio call, none of that, and ended up landing head on with another glider and pushed another glider into a ditch. Luckily, the gentleman in the glider that diverted wasn't hurt, but he totaled an airplane, so was avoidable. And then last one here is just examine your priorities every time you fly. It's easy to push the envelope, and just to help kick off the community of sharing and trust. I was at an aerobatic contest this weekend. When we're doing aerobatic contests from maneuver to maneuver, we have we call them gates, right? So at a particular maneuver, I need to be at a particular speed, either fast or slow, and there are risks of being beyond that gate in a given condition. And on a particular maneuver, I was about 15 knots too fast, and my competitive nature took over, and I elected to go ahead and continue to the next maneuver rather than burn the speed off and take the deduction for the line change. And I found myself inverted, which I was supposed to do on the maneuver, but I had to push a lot harder than I wanted to keep it under red line. So it was completely preventable had I not let my competitive nature take over. And this is easy to do just out leisurely flying. You take a risk that you may not otherwise take to try and stretch a glide or find another thermal, when in reality, we should have just accepted our defeat and headed into land or at least retreat. So next. All right, let's talk about aerobatics, because that's why you invited me here. Why do aerobatics? As I said at the onset, not everybody that gets into aerobatics needs to take it into the competitive arena, but there's a lot of benefit to putting your mind, your body, through different sensations and sight pictures and attitudes. I would be interested, and you guys can chime in because it's much more enjoyable when it's interactive. Have any of you ever been out flying and encountered some wake, some rotor on the lee side, possibly wake off a large airplane? I've heard of thermals that'll roll you into weird attitudes. Has anybody been sideways, upside down in some weird situation that you weren't anticipating in a given moment? Anybody? Come on, it's okay.
Yeah, no, affirmative.
Yeah,
Big
it
drop on
happens.
the wing and the nose in a thermal was not expected.
Yep, and I had a student in a couple weeks ago. He was out flying a duo. I don't remember the exact situation, but he ended up about 30 degrees upside down, just very instantaneously. I don't know again the exact situation, but it happens without you being totally prepared for it. So one of the big things that we focus on in the initial aerobatic training is just exposing your mind and your body to those, because in the event that it happens, even if it was a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's a small piece of information that the body and the brain has already been exposed to, and it shortens your processing time and increases your reaction time, and those seconds can matter. Challenges by and large, whether you're adding ratings, if you're an airplane guy, you're adding float ratings or multi ratings or instrument ratings, the challenges that we overcome through that training increases your overall airmanship and comfort. And then the last thing that I always like to say is that you don't rise to the occasion. In the event that something catastrophic happens, you are not suddenly bestowed with this magic skill or ability. You are lowered to the level of your training. So it's important to train regularly a number of the emergencies that you may encounter. A lot of folks are really, really prudent about rope breaks and land outs and things like that. But spins, when was the last time you do spin recovery? Now, some of the clubs, that's another nice thing about being a commercial operation, is we get a lot of interaction with club members from all over the country. And I know some of the clubs, they do spin training with their membership every year as kind of their spring checkout. So there's some benefit to that too. But you should be regularly practicing your emergencies. Like I said, whether it spins, whether it stalls, turning stalls, straight stalls. And then in the aerobatic environment, obviously, we've got the right equipment, which gives you a big training envelope to allow you to commit some of those more common mistakes, which allows you to learn from those mistakes while also keeping you well within the desired safety envelope. Generally, in the aerobatic training, where we start, if you folks don't have any aerobatic training, we generally start with loops, which gets you exposed to the acceleration, which most of you probably aren't used to. though you guys that are ballasted up with a bunch of water are running pretty fast on occasion. But we might be running anywhere between 110 and 140 knots, depending on the maneuver that we're doing. And then you're pulling anywhere from 4 to 6 Gs, and that's a pretty significant pull. Oftentimes a much greater pull than most folks are used to. And the speed control is that critical piece with the G loading there and coming out of a spin. If you haven't done spin training in a glider in some time, the speed comes on pretty quick. And if you're too timid with the G loading, you can find yourself up to or through redline quite quickly. After we've exposed you to that general sensation of being upside down and that G loading, we generally focus the majority of the training on rolls. Specifically, we start with half rolls from upright, which is a harder skill to master, but the more critical skill is you're more likely to find yourself inadvertently upside down than you are to accidentally roll yourself upside down. And so giving you the mindset and the skills to keep it on heading, control the energy, and bring it back upright is a very useful skill to have. The common thing, or when we do this in the simulator, one of the common things we see is the initial inclination when somebody finds themselves upside down is to pull through. But if you're fast when you get rolled upside down, again, you're going to be over red line quite quickly, and then you get into all the obvious dangers that we're aware of with flutter. There was a club down in Tucson that wrecked a DG 505 when they oversped it and asymmetrically failed the spoilers, completely failed the elevator, and luckily both pilots on board survived, but it was preventable. So, next slide, please. I can talk about aerobatics all day long. If you guys want to do questions and answers, we can do that. If you want to talk about the training, I'm happy to do that. I'm here for you. I'd be more than willing to bring the glider up to you. There is obviously a cost analysis here where we need to make it, worthwhile. Then Chris and I were kind of going back and forth about just kind of a target, ballpark number of flights that we need to do, and we can get into all those details later once we kind of have a better gauge on the interest. There is no set number of flights that anybody would need to commit to. You can do 1 flight, you could do 5 flights, 10 flights. It is entirely up to you. At our schoolhouse, we generally do either a 5-flight or 10-flight course over a period of 2 to 4 days. So again, it would depend on everybody's availability, level of interest. We found through the years of experience we've had that most folks can really only handle 2 to 3, maybe at most, aerobatic flights on a given day. The G loading is pretty fatiguing. We don't do a lot of negative Gs, but you are momentarily at anywhere between about a half, 0, and maybe up to -1. And just that back and forth between the positive and light negative can be a little unsettling for folks. So until you've built some of that resistance, we try and limit your exposure to it just to keep the enjoyment from the training at a high level. Any questions?
Shad, can you talk about the glider that you would be bringing up?
Yeah, so we use the MDM Fox as our trainer. It's a 2-seat Polish-built aerobatic aircraft, has a V&E of 152 knots. Solo, it's +9, -6. On the G loading dual, it's +7, -5. So we like it because it's got really big speed, really big G envelopes, which allows us to afford you to make some of those mistakes that you're going to make, and that's fine, you're learning. But we don't want to be encroaching heavily on the safety margins. Many of the clubs will use the Grove or the K-21, and they're capable aircraft, but the roll rate's slow. The maximum speeds are relatively low. The G loading limitations are relatively low. So the aircraft we use is kind of the prominent aerobatic 2-place aircraft in the world, between the Fox or the Swift, which is a single place kind of little brother to that aircraft. Sir.
Yeah, Shad, just had a quick question on your presentation of accidents and how they relate to experience level. I guess 2 things. One is the slide doesn't really give the denominator in terms of, it just gives the number of accidents in each experience category, but it doesn't really include the number of hours flown in each category. So
yeah,
it's not rate, it's just a total number, would be my impression.
Yeah, and like I said, there were another 30 slides in that deck that I hid where he really went into some great granular detail about each one of the areas, and I didn't want to turn this into a 2-hour presentation. What I really wanted to drive is that there's a heavy, safety aspect to what we do. It's easy to forget that we're all connected to one another. Most of the clubs and commercial operators are on the group insurance policy, so when one club or one operator has an accident, our collective insurance rates are affected. So there's a benefit to us as a community encouraging safety, kind of self-policing folks that are making bad decisions and exposing the rest of us to an unnecessary amount of financial risk. Not that the bottom dollar is the be all end all, but
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think one of the interesting things in gliding is that the accidents, unlike powered aircraft, do seem to be skewed in a more of a experienced, higher experienced, more accidents. And whether it's related to the competition or pushing the envelope further, I'm not sure. But I've heard, and maybe you can expand on this, that of the national and world champions, a lot of them are no longer alive because of glider accidents. You would think they've got all this experience and that they would have a very low accident rate, where I guess they push things so hard to win these competitions that bad things happen more frequently. Is that?
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. And I have done one cross country race in my glider flying career. And I'm a very competitive guy by nature. And I actually hated it because I found myself making a number of decisions I would not otherwise make had I not been in that environment. I was putting myself in situations and places I would not be for the sake of being competitive on a given day. And so, yeah, most of those guys, unfortunately, when you push the limits push back. Anybody else?
Chad, you might turn your camera on so we can see you there.
Oh, so everybody can see me? Yeah, I was trying to limit the bandwidth utilization. Here I am. Hi, guys.
So Chad, this is Craig Funston. I just want to express interest in flying aerobatics in the Northwest. I would love to have you come up here and would certainly partake.
Great. Yeah, most folks enjoy it. They really walk away from it with a renewed sense of appreciation for what the gliders are capable of. Most of us spend a vast majority of our time in a very small portion of the flight envelope. You're either on glide, making small pitch changes, trying to maximize the glide, or you're banked up in a thermal, but even then you're in a relatively small portion of the aircraft's flight envelope. So when we start to stretch and expand, our awareness and appreciation of what the aircraft are really capable of, it empowers you as a pilot. It gives you a greater appreciation of what you're capable of, first of all, as a pilot, and then what the aircraft are capable of. And they're really remarkable machines.
Yeah, Chad, Brad again here.
Yeah.
With our recurrent trainings, I'm always a little bit surprised how little people know about, risks for spins, recovery from spins, and what really is going on with spins, and the difference between a slip, skid, a slip and a skid,
Yeah.
and how one is so much more critical than the other.
Yep.
I'd imagine you find the same thing, but it's so
We
important
do.
to understand.
Yeah, very. When I do the upset recovery training in the Fox, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll do a turning stall, but I'll have the student induce a slip and show them how the aircraft corrects. It usually comes over the top versus a skid, and it immediately just snaps onto its back. So it reinforces that critical coordination that we learn in an early state in our primary training. In the spin training, we talk a lot about the aerodynamic forces and the inertial forces. One of the I don't want to call it a shortfall, but it's a very common thing. You develop some muscle memory and mental memory as a power pilot in the airplane world. For those of you that may not be airplane guys, when we talk about spin recovery, we talk about PAIR is the acronym. So you bring the power back, you neutralize the ailerons, which neutralizes the drag and the differential drag, which likely induced the spin. You use rudder to oppose the rotation, and then once the rotation stops, you break the stall. In the glider world, the wings are so long, and the rudder and the lever arm that the rudder has relative to the inertial forces and the drag forces that the ailerons are inducing way out on those big 15, 18, 20 meter wings, you're wasting time in the recovery trying to oppose the rotation with the rudder. So the single most important thing in the spin in a glider is simply break the stall. You can use no opposing rudder at all and it'll break the spin. Now, it will probably continue to rotate a quarter to a half a rotation, depending on the aircraft, but it will recover without any outset rudder just by breaking the stall. Now, use the rudder to shorten the rotation time, but it's a bit of a mismatch. And so we've got to reprogram those folks that have that long muscle memory and mental memory on the recovery techniques from airplanes as they transition into gliders. But it's worth practicing repeatedly, just like rope breaks are worth practicing repeatedly. You know, every time I give somebody a flight review, they get a rope break because you need to see one. It's the most likely emergency that you'll have, especially down low. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good contrast between powered aircraft and gliders, and one which I really didn't appreciate as much. I've got a Christian Eagle, so I give aerobatic instruction in that.
Yeah, great. Little clip wing, wonderful little thing.
Of course,
yeah.
The rudder is extremely powerful. It's
yeah.
got tiny little short wings. So
yeah, and in the airplane world, you got that 400-pound engine out on that nose, and so actually breaking the stall without it can exacerbate the spin. But there are just different characteristics, different techniques that really need to be understood and trained and exercised, so that when you find yourself, hopefully not, but if you find yourself in that situation and you're in the glider, you respond correctly instead of as if you were in the Eagle and wondering why it's not coming out of the state that it's in.
Yeah, gliders are a whole different world.
They are. Yeah, they truly are, but I love them. My glider is never down from engine failure.
Looks like there's a hand up, a guest, Dodrig.
So this is Dave Widrig. So I am interested in getting the training as well. However,
Great.
First thing is I'm south of Portland, so I haven't heard discussion of where you would be doing this.
We'd be
And-
out of Freda.
Okay,
We'd
so
be
then
bringing
there.
the aircraft. Yep.
Okay, so the second piece of it is reluctant to admit I weigh more than an FAA standard person. What are the weight limits for doing this?
Yeah, that's one of the unfortunate things with aerobatics. The aircraft carry most of the same limitations, 110 kilos to 242 pounds, but I have to back that off about 20 pounds for a parachute. So my maximum weight is 225 pounds, roughly.
Okay, well, if I don't gain anything, I'm over the summer, I'm all right.
Yep.
So that's kind of a good question. The CG that you normally do your aerobatic, or what's the CG on your aircraft that you normally fly aerobatics at? Is it mid-range or?
Weight rise? Yeah, it's mid-range. Empty, it's a little over 800 pounds. It's got 1,280 pound gross, and I'm 190 pounds, 205 with my parachute on. So I've got a pretty decent useful load. I can take you pretty much right up to 242 pounds and be well within the CG on the aircraft.
And do you commonly with students ballast at different weights to see?
No, I just try and get them in my optimal range. I don't like to do aerobatics less than about 260, 265. I've got ballast I can put in to get us there. The Fox, just by virtue of what it's designed to do, it's an unlimited aerobatic aircraft. It is incredibly heavy on the tail because they've really beefed up the fuselage and the tailplane to handle all the weird forces that we put on it. So I can put a person in the front seat and sit on the front of the Fox and it won't lift the tail wheel off the ground.
Yeah. A lot of us fly with the CG fairly aft for better performance.
Yeah, you guys are worried about the performance. Yeah. When I'm zipping around at 140, pulling 4Gs, I'm making a bunch of drag. So I'm not as worried about the performance as I am the stability of the aircraft. Yeah.
What is the
experience?
what's the roll rate on? Oh, sorry, Chris.
Roll rate on, it's a little less than 4 seconds, which for a glider's pretty good. The DG1000, the Grove, the K21, they're in the 8 to 8.5 range, depending on how aggressive you are. Certainly not a Christian Eagle.
No, I fly most of the time with 26.5 meters, so I'm not
yeah,
used to a fast roll rate.
Yeah. Well, this would blow your socks off. Yeah, it'll
Okay,
roll right around that. Yeah. Yeah. If you and the ailerons on this are 2/3 of the trailing edge. So when you ask it to go, it just goes. Yeah. It's got relatively low breakout force, meaning as you depart the aileron out into the wind, and it's very light, very well balanced, very big controls through the through the rudder and the elevator. So it's a very responsive, very enjoyable aircraft to fly. Doesn't glide very well though, 32 to 1.
Well,
Hey, Shad, if you were to
Go
if you were to come up to Ephrata, would it just be you, or would it be multiple instructors with a couple different airplanes?
It would be me and one airplane. Now, I said earlier in the briefing that, we try and limit it to 2 to 3 per person per day. I try and keep it less than 12 for me personally. I've got a decent amount of exposure and resistance to some of those forces. Obviously, I make sure that I get time to eat and hydrate because those are important for the G fatigue. But it's pretty common for us to work with anywhere between 3 and 5 students on a given day. We've got a couple clubs that send a bunch of folks down in groups. But unfortunately, just that time of year, we're getting into our high demand kind of season as it starts to cool off, where we get folks that as the club season starts to come to a close and they want to, get to the finish line, that our training really starts to ramp up. So we can only afford to send one plane and one instructor.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, Shad, Brad again here. See, I just wanted to thank you and your organization. Our club occasionally deals with instructor issues where we're just coordinating schedules and the weather in the Northwest. So we've sent a number of our students down to your organization in the last few months, and you guys have done a great job of polishing them off, getting them rated, and then they come back. It's worked out really quite well. So just want to give kudos for that. Thank you.
I appreciate that. That's really why we're here. I mean, yes, we're a business, but we exist to support the soaring community. As you pointed out, the instructor, it's hard to get students through it. We get a number of folks that come to us that have been in a club for 2-3 years and they're not done with their rating, or they've been on a waiting list for 2-3 years because the club's only capable of getting, so many people through. So that's our sole purpose, is just to support the community and support the clubs, and we're happy to do so in any way that we can.
I understand that you supply the parachutes. Can people bring their own parachute, or?
Yeah, you can. I'll bring usually 2 or 3 with me, mostly because depending on the conditions, the back pads can get kind of hot and sweaty, and it's not nice putting on a hot, sweaty parachute from your buddy in front of you. So I usually bring a couple. But yeah, you're welcome to wear your own if you're comfortable with it. There's no specific requirement in the aerobatic world. We just use a different kind of webbing setup on the front so that the buckles aren't, digging into our pelvis. But we can usually, depending on the given make and model, most of you are either wearing a softy or a strong parachute probably, and we interact with those pretty routinely. So wouldn't be a problem to supply your own parachute. Potentially, if your parachute didn't work by some weird off chance, I'll have some with me. I'll basically supply everything except for the tow plane, unfortunately.
So for someone that's never flown aerobatics and they basically want to come out and learn about how to recover from an upset, can you walk us through just what you would do with them first and how many instruction flights you would recommend for someone like that?
Yeah. We generally start people with loops just to get them comfortable with the speed, the noise, and the pole pressures. Now, nothing we do in aviation is without risk. So I can't tell you that a loop is a no risk maneuver, but it is a relatively low risk maneuver. There are a couple areas in the figure where there are some dangers. In the Fox, the aircraft we use, the key danger is on the back side of the loop as you're coming down. If you're not pulling hard enough, you just accelerate so fast. I mean, these things are like a missile when they're pointed straight down. So you got to be really prudent with that pull pressure. And so it's a good maneuver to get you comfortable with the amount of pull that you need to mitigate that speed. So generally we start you with the loop just to get you comfortable with the speeds, comfortable with the Gs. The initial portion of the aerobatic training is a little bit, I kind of jokingly refer to it as the glider world's instrument training, because most of our aviation careers, unless you're doing instrument flying, you're taught to look outside and use the horizon, listen to the aircraft, see and avoid. But when we start to really expand into the outer reaches of the aircraft's flight envelope, you need to be really keenly aware of the speed and the forces that you're putting on the aircraft. And so you spend a fair amount of time actually inside looking at the gauges and looking at the panel. And that's a bit of a departure from what many folks are used to. So the loop again is a low risk, not a no risk, but a relatively low risk maneuver to get you exposed to that more keen awareness of the G forces and the speeds. And you can't safely train or do aerobatics without a G meter. There are folks that do it. I know some of the aircraft are rated for some simple aerobatics, but if you don't have a G meter in your aircraft, you're really exposing yourself to a fairly high level of risk without knowing the exact amount of loading that you're putting on your aircraft. After that, once you're kind of calibrated to the pull pressures that are needed, we'll start to expose you to some different flight attitudes, and it'll be completely dependent on what the student wants to experience. We'll roll them upside down and let them just hang inverted for a minute to kind of expose them to that. We'll let them kind of calibrate those pushing forces, going back to the scenario I gave you earlier where you're flying along and you're just inadvertently flipped upside down. The prudent thing might be to actually push the nose up and decelerate the aircraft even to the stall. I mean, that's the absolute slowest that the aircraft can go, and then pull it through if you're not comfortable with the roll. But immediately trying to pull it through, if you were to get rolled over, you quickly overspeed the aircraft. So, but what we do specifically will depend on the student. Some want to do spins, we do spins. I'll occasionally do a half snap to inverted just to show people how quickly and violently an aircraft can be rolled upside down in wake, whether it be behind a mountain or up in the air behind a big jet. I read an article a year or two ago about a Gulfstream that got flipped upside down after it flew behind an A380. So it can happen to aircraft of all sizes and all weights and all speeds and pretty rapidly. So half snap's a pretty good way to kind of demonstrate how quickly that can happen. Gives them a minute to kind of rattle their internal gyros and then figure out what's going on and then start the recovery action. We can do a slower, more gentleman's kind of input to inverted and then get in the aircraft and talk through the recovery. We can do, like I said, turning stalls, coordinated, and then slipping and skidding and see how the aircraft like to react or misbehave in some cases. Relative to those conditions that we're inducing on the aircraft. So we can take it a number of different ways. It's completely customized to the student. We'll provide some feedback and some direction, but ultimately we just want it to be something that's a positive and enjoyable environment for the folks that are spending their time and hard-earned money taking the training.
Well, I'm one that has experienced an upset in a really strong thermal before, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
How high do you normally tow to start out with? We've got 1,700 foot altitude at the airfield. So what altitude would we normally take a tow to start the training?
Yeah. It kind of depends on how you guys pay. At our facility, the most expensive part of the tow is the first 1,000 feet. We essentially cover all the operating costs, the insurance, the fuel, the manpower, all that really in the first core section of the tow. And then anything after that, you're just paying for the gas and time on the airplane. So it really just depends on you guys. At our schoolhouse, we do 5,000 foot AGL tows, and that gives you a pretty good envelope of airspace to work through. And then we take it down to the legal limit usually, which is 1,500 feet AGL, unless the student just isn't enjoying the experience. And obviously we can temper it back a little bit.
And is that always in an airbag box, or do you?
Yeah, it needs to be in an approved aerobatic area. So it doesn't necessarily need to be in an aerobatic box, but you can't be within 4 nautical miles of a Victor Airway. I think it's 91.303. I'd have to go double check the regulation again, but there are regulatory guidances on specifically where we can do this training, just to make sure we're not exposing ourselves or other transient aircraft to potential risk. So an aerobatic box is the easiest way to do it, but it's not necessary per se. The nice thing about AFREDA is they have one, and it'll be active when I'm up there. So it just makes sense to do it there.
Great. Any
Chris,
other questions?
This is Craig. I don't know how much interest we're going to get from the glider group. I hope a lot. But we could also reach out to our local IAC chapter that flies regularly out of that area. And I'm sure some of them might enjoy glider aerobatics rather than power.
Yeah, we're slowly trying to expand the outreach of the competitive environment in aerobatics. Just to kind of continue to enhance the sport and grow the sport. And we're seeing an uptick in the powered folks that are doing it. That's why Jerry was invited. He flies his extra out of AFREDA there, and he's also a newly participating glider aerobatic pilot. Seems to be enjoying it. quite a bit. But you don't have to do it at the competitive level. There's a lot of benefit to it. Like I said, just exposing your mind and your body to new sights and sensations and things that you may not otherwise experience when you're straight and level.
Yeah, I was hoping Jerry could be here. He's actually based at Arlington, just north of Seattle, and he owns a MDM-1 Fox
He does,
glider,
yeah.
but he keeps it down there in Arizona.
He does,
So
yeah.
I was hoping maybe he'd
we're,
bring it up as well.
We are so spoiled down here. We average 7 non-flyable days a year. So a lot of the guys will keep their aircraft down here just because the weather almost always plays along.
So Chris, James Cooper here. How many folks do you need to make this event at a freighter viable? And roughly when you're looking at doing it, and perhaps some rough estimate costs. Obviously, you mentioned depends on how many tows you take and so forth, but just some ballpark numbers to calibrate us.
Yeah. So we can rework this, and let me pull up my notes here. Originally, I was planning on driving up, but I was at this contest this past weekend, and I was flying with another competitor named Mallory. He's out of Oregon, and it just hadn't dawned on me that Mallory's got his Fox up there, so it would be a much easier transit to bring his Fox to a freighter than for me to drive one up from Arizona. So in that scenario, it would significantly lower the cost of the training, or at least the required number of sorties, because I'm not trying to offset time that I'm away from the business where I could be generating revenue, transportation costs, hotel costs, all these other things that I would infer driving up to you. But originally, before I had that kind of brilliant idea, look through my notes here. And Chris, do you happen to remember? I sent you a general rough number.
Well,
it sounds like a lot, but it wasn't a lot.
Yeah. Well, talking to Jerry Reedinger, who is with the local chapter, IAC chapter, he said he might have 3 to 4 people from his group that would be interested in doing sailplane aerobatics. And when I was thinking of doing it is the Labor Day weekend, we would come out and fly, and then that week after Labor Day, we could do the training with people leading up to the Apple Turnover Cup that the IAC organization would be having on that weekend on Saturday. And they would need Thursday, Friday pretty much to practice in the aerobatic box. So we wouldn't be able to use it as much as we would like on Thursday and Friday because we'd be sharing it with the powered aircraft. But I think depending on how much interest we got, we can just change the number of days based on that, starting out on Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, and looking through my notes, I'd come up with 50 to 60 flights, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not when you break it out over 5 or 6 days. That's 10 pilots that do 5 flights. It's 1 pilot that does 10, 1 pilot that does. So it accumulates pretty quick. So it sounds like a big number, but it's really not that many.
And if people are already experienced and might just want to fly more basic airbags or advanced, would you be able to do that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Like I said, we can tailor it entirely to whatever the student is comfortable and capable to do safely. Once you've really mastered and I'll use mastered loosely, once you have a baseline level of competency with loops and rolls, then we can start to teach you some of the more kind of intermediate figures like half Cubans, Immelmans. We teach you some vertical work, hammerheads, if you're interested in those. They're super fun maneuvers. There are some risks there, but they're super fun maneuvers. The Fox will handle everything well. Worst thing you're going to do in a hammerhead is a vertical maneuver where you kick it over and then come back down on the vertical line. Worst thing you're going to do in the hammerhead in the Fox is just stall it and back up, what we call a tail slide. The aircraft's built for it, and we just recover from it. But
I mean, would a person potentially be able to even fly in the Apple Turnover Cup with 2 people in the aircraft?
Absolutely. Yeah, I could ride safety in the contest, which I do pretty routinely for folks that are just getting into it. I trained a young lady this spring for a contest at our facility. She competed in primary, which is the lowest level, and has 6 figures in it. Pretty low level kind of catalog of figures that's required. And we did her training over 8 flights, and then she went and totally kicked butt in the contest. So.
Well, we got any more questions from people?
Hey, Shad, in 60 seconds or so, what is your background and how did you get into it?
Yeah, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. So I grew up in Colorado Springs, always wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. They've got a gigantic glider operation there, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. So that was kind of the path that I always wanted to be on. I found out my sophomore year in high school that I was colorblind, not significantly, but enough that I'm obviously not going to fly anything fast and pointy for the Air Force. But still had that drive to get into aviation. Got into paragliding and hang gliding, got into powered flying, and then went and took a glider ride a number of years ago, and just kind of fell in love with it. It was that nexus of the free flight community that I was involved in, with some of the more passive safety of having a solid structure around you instead of essentially a bed sheet with some dental floss. And then I went in 2017, I took a ride with Jason, an aerobatic ride, and I was just instantly captivated with it. And so I've just been charging hard on the aerobatic front here for the last 6 years now. So
Great.
Well, I personally flew with Jason down there and really enjoyed it and learned a lot from him.
Yeah,
I didn't fly as many flights as I would like, but just the couple that I did was a great experience.
Yeah, he's an incredible pilot, a great instructor. He's so calm in the back seat, and as I teach more and train more and compete more, you really start to see when things are about to go wrong. Right? You get kind of more awareness of when things are starting to get outside of where they need to be. And he's just so incredibly calm in the back seat. First time I did a tail slide or hammerhead, he's like, "Yeah, this isn't going to go very well," and we just kind of worked it out. But it's a fun environment to be involved in. I'm very, very blessed and very lucky for sure.
So Chris, Shad, this is James again. So for those of us that are interested in aerobatic training, what's the next steps? Do we contact you, Chris, go through you, or do we email both of you? Do we indicate how many flights we'd be interested in? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I would say make Chris the point man. I've got a number of things on my plate right now. I'm training for the World Aerobatic Championships in Poland, so I'm going to be bouncing all over the country doing some training and some camps. And then I'm the contest director for the National Aerobatic Championships in Salina at the end of September. So my plate is overflowing at the moment, but I'm happy to come up and support you guys. I just need, Chris and I talked previously about him taking the point. So just get a good head count. And it doesn't need to be anything we commit to, now. We'll have some flexibility leading up to it as folks kind of get out of hibernation and get a little bit more active in the community. You guys can socialize this opportunity a little bit. But just get a good head count on maybe who's interested, the number of flights you may be interested in, and you're not necessarily committed to that, but just so we can make a good evaluation on whether or not it's viable for us to put in the effort to get the aircraft up there and execute this training.
Yeah, so maybe now's a good time to take a poll, and if everybody that might be interested in doing something this fall, Labor Day, just raise your hand.
Hey, Shad, is there an age
Looks like-
requirement?
Nope.
Looks like
No age.
11. So we maybe 12. Yeah,
That's great.
13.
Yeah,
We've
that's
got
great.
some good interest.
Yeah, no,
Excellent.
that's fantastic to see.
Excellent.
Somebody was
And that's only
asking
the
about
people
it.
that are on tonight. you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so
asking me
if
something
everybody that raised their
super
hand,
popular.
if you could send me an email and give me your name and contact information, I can get you on the list and we can get this going.
Hey, Shad, are you able to conduct the spin training for an instructor initial training and provide that endorsement?
Sure can. Yep. And I do it in the Fox.
Okay. Yeah. So anybody that knows anybody that might be thinking about getting their instructor rating, that sounds like a great opportunity to get their spin training done.
Yeah, in a good aircraft, like I said, it spins easy, recovers easily, but it's got the big safety training envelopes that we like relative to the V and E and the G loading. So we do all of our spin training in the Fox.
Shad, sorry, it's Henry Rebeck here. Yeah, I had just a couple of questions.
What's up, Henry?
Yeah, so my first was really, if you go and learn to do these arrows in the Fox, what of those arrows can you translate into our own gliders, and are we allowed to do arrows in our own gliders?
Yeah, there's nothing that precludes you. Aerobatics isn't anything that requires a specific endorsement or license or credential. The limitations on what you can do will be really dependent on your skill set and your aircraft. Not all aircraft are aerobatic rated. Many of them are rated for somewhat, again, what we call kind of gentleman's aerobatics. You can do some loops.
I think I come from the UK, and we always had like semi-aerobatic was the kind of the what we were allowed, and so I wasn't quite. I think that was just loops and stalls and stuff. But
yep. You'd have to really dig into the individual POH on each aircraft. Usually it's loops. Some of them will allow aileron rolls, but again, as your wingspan increases, your roll rate decreases fairly rapidly, so it makes rolls really not enjoyable at all. It also makes them quite jerky and potentially dangerous if you're not ahead of the pitch control. But we can teach you some fun maneuvers, loops, clover leafs, which is a looping maneuver with a quarter roll. You can do it on the up or the down. So there's some light level stuff that you can do. I want to go back and emphasize again that you can't safely do these without a G meter on your aircraft, because you need to be really precise with the G loading that you're putting on the aircraft. But once you're through the training, depending on your comfort and your aircraft's capabilities, you can absolutely go out and enjoy this on your own.
Okay, and my second question is, can you saw the Fox, or is it just a?
Oh no, it stalls. Yep.
No, not stall. Saw it. Is it can you thermal saw it? Yeah.
Sure. Yes, they sell it or advertise it as kind of a multi-role aircraft. It is certainly built for aerobatics, but it's got some 1 meter wingtip extensions that you can put on it. Pushes it out to just shy of 34-1, which isn't spectacular by any means, but it's decent. But
on a standard day, you're taking. I assume you're towing up high. You're doing aerobatics, and then you're landing. You're not soaring back up, and yeah.
And some of that's not necessarily an environmental limitation, as it is a physiology limitation, especially for a low time aerobatic person. You take them from that environment where you're doing some positive G's and light negative G's, and then you put them in the soaring, thermaling, bumpy merry-go-round environment, and from a physiology perspective, most folks just don't enjoy it. So.
Okay, thanks very much.
That is the glider pilot, the aerobatic glider pilot's dream, right? You do 5-10 minutes aerobatics, and you thermal back up, and you just do it again, and you just go up and down. Yeah.
Right. Save someone on those toes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an unfortunate part of the training is it is expensive because of all the towing, but invaluable in many respects. Great questions. And I heard somebody chime in asking about age. No, there is no minimum age. I would probably not do it with anyone under 14, and I would be very limited on what I would do with somebody of that age. Relative to older age, no, I'm going to leave that to the individual pilot to really make an evaluation of their physical capabilities. If you were, had low blood pressure problems, or I had a gentleman that signed up to do an aerobatic ride with me a couple weeks ago, and then he shows up, and one of the first things he tells me is he's got lower spine problems. And I'm like, well, I can't go put 4 G's on your body. You're not going to walk out of here. So I'll leave it to the individual person to kind of make an assessment on their ability. Hopefully they would be, forthcoming with me. There are still some things we can do and limit the stress on the body relative to what you think your limitations may be or should be.
Okay, James, Tori, Tim, and Dave, do you have questions, or is your hand still up from expressing interest?
Interest, I'll take mine off.
So in regards to cost, I think I can probably work with Shad, and we can figure out, what the cost will be, and then I can just get back to people. But maybe you can give us just a general idea what you think it might be, or.
Yeah, when I was working out and again, I'd have to rework these now that I potentially can just bring a Fox up from from Oregon, which really significantly reduces my time away from here, because you have to factor in the lost revenue of the business with my departure. But I had originally worked it out at $125 a flight, but it would be less than that, since I could shorten or lower my transient cost and time away from the business. So somewhere probably if I had to ballpark it, between probably $100 a flight.
Well, it's a unique experience that we don't get too often up here in the Northwest. So I think it's well worth it. Maybe if there's enough interest and we get people that want to maybe buy their own airbatic glider, Swift or something, we can get an airbatic club going. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, you could. It'd be great. The Swift is no longer in production. The Fox is. The other aircraft that's actually pretty reasonable soaring and aerobatic aircraft is an SZD 59. They're kind of hard to come by just because of that. You know, it's usually when you're building something that's a multi-role aircraft, it doesn't do all of it well, you know, versus a purpose-built aircraft. But the 59 is actually a really capable 40 plus, you know, one glider that's rated for up to advanced aerobatics.
Cool.
So fun stuff. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk to you guys and share our passion for aerobatics. Hopefully we can get some folks interested and into the cockpit.
Well, thanks, Chad. Really appreciate you putting together the presentation. A great presentation, by the way. Really enjoyed it and very informative.
Good. Yeah, I would encourage you guys to maybe invite Clemens on to give the full presentation. It's actually pretty remarkable when he gets into the details. It really gets you thinking about some of the risks that you might take and the dangers that you may not be considering or even aware of. So
yeah. All right, thanks.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Chad.
My pleasure.
I didn't know I was going to learn a lot tonight, and definitely did. Definitely excited to see you coming up here potentially. So, okay. Awesome. Any parting questions or comments for Chad? All right. The 15 seconds of silence.
All right.
I think that's it.
Well, thank you all. If I don't see you or talk to you between now and then, have a wonderful year or a wonderful season. Be safe out there, and blue skies.
All right. Thanks. Have a great night.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, for everybody left, that was pretty cool. I'm kind of excited about that. Hopefully you guys are too. So Chris will be kind of our point man for trying to get that set up. So send Chris an email expressing your interest, both number of flights, type of flights, any schedule limitations you might have. I know he was talking about the Labor Day weekend, but if you've got other schedule ideas, let Chris know. But he'll definitely put together numbers of flights and types of flights. So
and just email me at Chris K at SeattleGliderCouncil.org.
No, Chris.
Yeah, Chris K at SeattleGliderCouncil.org.
All right.
That's.
Yep. Okay. Thanks for setting that up, Chris. That was really cool, and hopefully we can maybe turn this into a semi-annual or once every 3 or 4 year type of thing. Yeah, that was great. So, okay, that's all I got for the meeting tonight. Does anybody have any parting shots or things they want to talk about?
I think there was someone that expressed concern about the DG-1000 replacement. They wanted to bring it up as a topic, and I don't know if maybe
Mike and Henry.
Mike can
maybe
say something
talk more about that.
Yeah, Chris, this was James Cooper. I just sent an email. It's not really a concern so much as just is there an update on what's been doing? And I had a quick chat with Mike Bamberg at the beginning, but that was before most people called in. So maybe you want to update so more people can hear what's going on.
Is Mike still on? How about Henry?
Yeah, I can't see if Mike's on or not. I mean, I can fill you in as well as Mike. I guess the first thing is that those that don't know, the DG has now we've received all the money from the insurance company, so we've got the money in. The old glider has now I took it down last couple of weeks ago to the freight forwarder, so we've the broken glider is now being shipped off, and I think it's heading off to Lithuania now, but that's kind of not our problem anymore. So that's all gone. We still have the trailer at Arlington. So we have been looking for gliders. It's pretty difficult to find replacements. However, one of the kind of the slightly more contentious issues at the moment is just figuring out how the foundation and the SGC operate. And it turns out there's been a few issues around the legal setup, and the reality is that the foundation really should be the sort of funding body that funds the operations, and the SGC becomes the operating organization. And it sounds a bit technical, and it's taken me a little while to get my head around why this matters, but until we've really figured that out, it makes it a little bit harder to kind of quite understand how we run the DG going forwards, assuming we do replace it. Our plan is to try and find a replacement, but it looks very unlikely that we'll have anything in place for this season. So if anybody knows of any two-seater gliders like DG 1000s, geodiscs that people are looking to sell, let us know, because we are interested. But we're finding it more difficult than I expected to find something. Other than that, I don't really have a huge amount to add. I don't know if anybody's got any other questions.
Yeah, just to follow on with that, Henry, James again.
Hi, James.
As I understand, we weren't fully insured for full replacement costs. So,
well, I mean, I think the figure, I can't remember the exact figure off the top of my head, but it was like 132K we got back from the insurance company. So it's it's a pretty decent amount, and there are gliders out there for that kind of money, and we've still got the trailer. So assuming we can sell the trailer for something, if we don't need it, we're trying to hang on to it at the moment, because if we find a glider without a trailer, then it seems crazy not to have kept it. But yeah, so it's it's not an insignificant amount of money. You should better, there are gliders out there for that sort of money. I mean, the ones that I've been looking at, they tend to come out more like more towards 150 than 130. But yeah, it's still it's not an unreasonable amount of cash.
All right, thanks.
Was it anybody else got any other questions on the DG?
Well, I'll continue on if you like.
Yeah, go for it. We've got some time. So
any additional thoughts? Obviously, you've had plenty to work on already, just in terms of dispositioning the glider itself and dealing with some of the legal issues you've just touched on. Have you had any bandwidth to kind of think about how we might alter the operational side of things going forwards, perhaps to better utilize that type of asset in the future?
Yeah, we certainly talked about it a lot. I don't want to commit to saying we've got a plan as such, because I think it's still very much in flux. I think the one thing is that we're very aware of all the learnings that came out of the incident with the DG and what happened there, and also the fact that it was actually quite difficult to get much flying in the DG, the way it was set up and the way that the roster worked was actually, I was on it for a few years, and maybe if you're lucky, you could get 1 or 2 days a year that lined up with the days you actually wanted, and the rest was a bit of a crapshoot for finding out when you could get it. So I think we would want to move probably to a model that it's it's more you're paying to fly on an individual basis and find a different way of scheduling the time. Would certainly be my approach to doing it. But that is definitely not something that we've kind of settled on anyway. And I think like finding a replacement glider is the bigger issue.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other last minute club business before we get everybody out of here? Probably about 30 minutes early. Okay. Well,
Next
thanks
meeting is when?
is this the
Is
last
there
one for the
June?
season?
I think this is the last one before the season. The only issue will be is if we need to schedule something in order to get this bylaws voted on.
Right. Yeah, there may be a special meeting for a bylaw vote. But other than that, this is the last meeting for the season. So we're getting warmed up for getting ready for the dust up and kick this year off.
Yeah, it's not the last one for the season, but the last one until this fall when we start having meetings again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I meant. We'll have our hands full of real flying instead of just talking about it. So
I'm not sure if it's September or October that we usually restart the meetings, but somewhere in there. Either September or October.
right. And there's been rumors that we're going to start up back at the Museum of Flight in the fall, possibly.
Yes, there's possibility if we can work out the details of doing audio. The issue is that it's difficult to have online meeting in combination with an in-person meeting, so we can get people that are long distances to attend. And if so you need to get the audio going so that people are in the in-person meeting speaking that everybody can hear what they're saying. So that's an issue that we need to resolve before we can really do it.
Yeah, we definitely want it. We don't want to exclude anybody that's out of the Seattle area. I think if COVID had one benefit, it was, switching to these online meetings really affords a lot of the more distant club members an opportunity to partake and stuff. And we don't want to lose that momentum. So I fortunate that my wife actually works for Microsoft and she knows a lot of really smart peoples on Teams. So I will talk to her and see what their recommendation is for how to handle meetings. I'm sure they do because they have meetings and broadcast teams to large environments all the time. So I'll take that on to pick her brain and pick her coworkers' brains about what might be available to us. I think the limiting thing might be bandwidth at the Museum of Flight, but I'm not sure what they have available there. So, okay, I'll take that on for my summer project. But with that, we can plan on tentatively meeting in the fall in the Museum of Flight. So,
Hey, Chris, any updates on the SGC tow planes? And has the 182 done any towing yet?
The 182 I've flown it a couple times. It has not done any towing yet, but I did get the rear view camera working and flew it to make sure it was vibration proof. And it flies great. It climbs like crazy.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so I think we're ready to go on that. I was in the Freda this past weekend, and we did some more work on the facilities, and I did bleed the left brake on the Pawnee because I just felt like that pedal was going a little lower, although still had plenty of braking action. It's perfectly flyable, but it just felt a little uneven with the right. And it was solid. There wasn't any air, but I noticed that the master cylinder was pushing a little bit of fluid up past the plunger rod. And actually, over a year ago when we were working on it, I remember there was a lot of red fluid around that, and I thought, something must be leaking there. And I thought maybe they had fixed that during the annual or something, but I think that's what it is. I think it's been that way for quite some time. So I did get an estimate to get that the O-rings or the seals in the master cylinder replaced, which I'm going to be talking to the board about in our next meeting to get approval for that. It's not urgent because it is still airworthy to fly, but it's something I want to get taken care of.
Thanks, Chris. Hey, Brad, do you have any updates on Metau or anything you want to talk about there?
Not really. I think there's still a couple of spots left, but it's about 90% full.
Okay, thanks. Chris, one more thing. Any pressing needs at the training facility that we might be able to help take care of the weekend of the dust up, or those of us that are going to stick around during the Evergreen encampment? Anything that we can get a small team and work on for you?
Yeah. Well, one thing I think we need to get the website, the glider trailer positions, name assignments on the website. I think that it's a little overdue. That could have happened sooner, right after our lottery last month. But if we can get that done, and we've not turned on the water yet at the bathhouse. Dennis said that he'll turn it on the next time he's out, and I think he's planning on. He's kind of watching the weather. He's hoping to come down with his glider and fly it. And so I think as soon as he brings his glider down, and he'll be turning the water on. Yeah, Mike is not on anymore, I don't think, but he could probably give you an idea of where we're at on replacing the deck on the bathhouse, which is hopefully still slated to happen before the dust up.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if Henry, do you know anything about that?
No. I did speak. Mike did mention it the other day, and I know his brother-in-law has done quite a lot of work on the drawings and stuff, but I don't know where they're at with that.
Okay, but yeah, we did some final touches on the training center this weekend, and I think it's ready to go. We've got that place fixed up, and I think you'll really enjoy the changes we made. One thing that we are still waiting for is the computer bar that would go underneath the TV that Noel mounted, and I think Noel was going to bring that out when he comes next time, and then we'll get that on the wall mounted.
Right. Okay. For those of you that don't know, one of the improvements that Noel did the weekend we opened up the facility, he put a computer monitor on the wall, and it's running a website that will track all the gliders out in the competition area up on the plateau, using FLARM and ADSB and all that stuff. It's pretty cool. It's kind of one of those big eye in the sky picture boards of airplanes moving around. So we can do a play-by-play on everybody's thermaling ability or something. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, a lot of great stuff happening there. Thanks for Chris and Nan for doing most of the work there and motivating those of us to come down and give them a hand. So really appreciate it.
I was hoping this, with the heat that we had this weekend, that it'd be some better soaring conditions. Unfortunately, on Saturday it was pretty stable, but Sunday was actually looking pretty good. There were some big flat bottom cumulus clouds out there with high cloud bases, and it didn't predict that on SkySight. So don't necessarily go by SkySight. I think SkySight under predicts Afreda a lot.
Yeah, I've seen it under predict Arlington. I think it's pretty conservative. I've been out there and the lift has been much better than SkySight is forecasted. So yeah, do your own research and hopefully the weather is good for you. So
we also have Sign Up Genius now on the website, and it's set up for about the middle of the month. I think it starts out for every day of the week rather than just weekends. And the idea there is, if we look like we get some really good conditions, we can organize to go over there for people that want to fly midweek, take advantage of the great conditions in the Afreda. So let's keep an eye on that and sign up.
okay. All right, people are slowly dropping offline, so I think we're getting to the end of everybody's interest here. Anybody else have any last minute items? All right, let's call it a night. Thanks everybody for joining, and make sure to send Chris an email with your interest in glider aerobatics. And hopefully we'll see you in a couple weeks out at Afreda at the Dust Up. Thanks everyone. See you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.